Oh, hi, everybody. My name is Matt Storrs, and welcome to Mattsplaining. On today's episode, I have an expert on who I'm very excited to talk with. Expert, please introduce yourself and tell us what you're an expert in.
Hi, I'm Naomi Fitter, an expert in human-robot interaction, as well as a semi-professional stand-up comedian. Right now, I'm a professor at Oregon State University, and I also perform stand-up largely around the Pacific Northwest, but also nationwide.
Absolutely fantastic. I am a big fan of Oregon State myself, and I've an interest in the topic, obviously, but I just would be remiss if I did not bring up that one of my favorite shirts from when I was a kid was an Oregon State shirt, which was just like an obnoxious orange. And I wore it as often as I could, to the point where my mom was like, we need to wash it more. So
Nice.
I don't know how much of an impact you've had on the selection of that orange color at Oregon State, but I commend you all for that orange. It's a high quality orange. Now,
Excellent. I
uh,
can't take it, but I can relate. I actually applied to Clemson for undergraduate and graduate school
mhm.
because of the colors orange and purple.
That's a great color scheme. It's just they know what they're
Purple.
doing down there in Clemson. Fantastic. So, to the topic at hand today, I feel like I'm a pretty knowledgeable about robot and human interactions. I think that folks are interacting with humans and less and less, and more with robots as time goes on. And I think one of the things that people will turn to is the idea that robots are going to take our jobs and that they're already coming in and taking jobs away from people or automating things. And it's like, well, how long until that automation just replaces a person? But I think that there's always got to be somebody around to check the work, because the simple thing with like fast food, for instance, they think like fast food workers will be replaced by robots. But the thing is, then you're still going to get mistakes with the fast food, because instead of having a misunderstanding with the cashier or the staff person at the fast food restaurant, you're going to get a computer and a robot that is going to have embedded user errors, or you're going to cause a user error because you did not put in the thing. And I think people are going to have a big problem with the fact that they're going to have to take responsibility for their mistakes, and there's not a human there to pass the blame off because you press the wrong button or something like that. And I think that a lot of people overlook that aspect, how
Have you
important the idea of misunderstandings ultimately are, as opposed to taking responsibility for your errors or the errors of the designer, even.
have you
And
run into this already with like automated phone lines or that sort of thing?
oh, absolutely. It's already there. You press the wrong button and then you realize, oh wow, I'm actually in the debug mode of this call center, and I can clear my debt because I pressed the wrong three buttons in the sequence. And it's like I didn't intend to take advantage of this system and erase my medical debt, but I guess since we're here. And
Nice.
another thing that I think a lot of people look to is the various tests that we have computers doing. But I think that like the famous one with the Turing test, with the how a computer communicates with a human, always can we tell if it's a computer, what have you. And I think that what people overlook with that is, can we tell if it's another human even at this point? Like, are the references adequate enough? Are they able to truly, like, eventually we have all of these images and captchas and what have you, that we hope like, oh, computer can't understand what a crosswalk is or whatever. But eventually kids might not know, if we have automated cars, they might not know what a street light is. And so they're not going to be able to pass that test either, because they don't know what the street light is. They don't know what a crosswalk is because they're going from car to car or vehicle to vehicle. And so I think that there's eventually going to be a convergence where like the computers are going to have to do a Turing tests on one another to see if there are humans actually involved in the segment because their computers are going to be consistently working with one another. And
Is
then
this like that Ray Bradbury short story, the one I'm talking about, where like the aliens think the cars are the people?
yeah, so that might have some basis in where it came up with this idea.
We
And
covered that on another episode.
yeah. And then ultimately, I think that people think about robots, human interactions, about like, oh, there's going to be the potential for war, there's going to be the potential for replacing jobs. Then some segments of the population, the ideas of like, are robots going to be used for sex work or other types of companionship? And I think that beyond all of that stuff, I think that there's a dynamic where robots are just going to be like there to slightly inconvenience you and
Hmm.
also slightly convenience you. Where, like, for instance, one thing I do is, regardless of the sentient level of the computer, if I interact with a computer, what I perceive to be a computer, like whenever I turn on my headphones or like I scan into the turnstiles in the subway, I always say, "Thank you, computer."
Oh,
And
very nice.
yeah, and people think like, oh, why are you doing that? I'm like, well, you don't know which computer is going to gain sentience first. It might be this turnstile. It might be one of the satellites we send into space. We don't know. But if I am saying thank you and like, computer, as much as I possibly can, I increase the likelihood that the computer is going to be like, what? We'll give him the companion to hang out with and to talk with who has a little bit more specialized knowledge and that
Mhm.
has a little bit more empathy. Or I don't know how they're going to assign our companions when they take over, but i
Oh,
think I think
yeah.
that the ones that you want to be connected with are the ones where they're like, oh, this is one of the good humans. That's ultimately what I want to be. Now, based on what you've heard so far, about how much of that would you say was accurate?
I have to say, let's see, you're definitely more of a human than a robot,
Okay.
maybe 70%, maybe.
Okay. I've heard that before, that I do have robotic tendencies, but I do still come out a little bit more human. And
Mhm.
now, what got you first interested in robotics?
Well, actually, I joined my undergraduate robotics team and I noticed that folks around me were a little more on the sociopathic side than I totally felt comfortable with running prospective future cohort of overlords. So that's kind of what inspired me to get involved. There was also free pizza, which
That'll
I
do it.
really appreciated as a college student. And they were even open to putting pineapples on the pizza, which I found very exciting.
Making waves right away is what I'm hearing, is really busting through and making people rethink their choices by being like, let's get some pineapple on it. Now, may I ask, are you a canned pineapple person or a fresh pineapple person?
Oh, fresh pineapple, but I have ruined one a Jello with that accidental mistake. So there are benefits of many fruits and different kinds of pineapples.
Absolutely. Very true.
I was gonna start to school you maybe on some of the robotics topics. One thing I noticed was that when you were talking about robots, you were talking about robots that have kind of a physical form and some sort of AI agents that aren't necessarily physically embodied. So one thing I'll share just for your general edification is
Mhm.
kind of the Spong Hutchinson and Vinyasagar definition of a robot,
Okay.
which involves at least one moving part. So usually in that textbook, it's a rotating or extending joint. You can think about like a telescoping thing or a robot arm that kind of rotates around different joints and is also programmable. So I think
Okay.
some of the robots you talked about fail the Spong Hutchinson Vinyasagar test, but many of them do indeed pass. So you're a astute learner of robotic things.
Okay. Excellent. Yeah, I had never I'd heard about that. So what is something with robot and human interaction that you find most fascinating?
One thing that I'm really curious about is that when humans respond to robots, despite your kind of general acceptance of AI agents as robotic, Typically, people respond to physically embodied robots, these robots that have hardware and kind of take up space in the world with us, differently than they do computers, so sort of phone, computer apps, treating them more as kind of co-social beings. So when you're thanking the turnstiles, that's kind of a good example of how people might respond to robot hardware versus something even that seems social on their phone or computer. In one classic example, all the way back in like 2010 or 2011, there was an experiment where people saw if a robot or a video of a robot could persuade undergraduate students to throw away new textbooks. And they noticed that when the physically present hardware of the robot was there, the students were open to doing this, but with the video, almost no one did it. So there's kind
Interesting.
of this interesting persuasion you get when you have robot hardware. It could be useful or it could be sinister. I like to think of it in a optimistic way. So imagining that maybe robots can help save us from ourselves, like give us little nudges to eat better, to do exercise. But there's certainly other topics that come up when you think about robots and robots interacting with humans as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that one of the things that people often overlook, at least I have definitely been responsible for overlooking it, is just how often I am convinced that to purchase something when one of those like did you ever go to FAO Schwarz as a
I don't know
kid?
if I was in the store,
Okay,
but I know
so
the
yeah,
methods from reviews.
yeah, so they had like big animatronics and like they would have like an animatronic tree and they'd be like, "Hey, we have this special deal, like welcome into the store and what have you." I what you're saying really makes a lot of sense and I think that I was very much more prone and have since been more prone if there was some sort of animatronic to
Mhm.
purchase or engage more so than I would have been otherwise.
Nice. So you're working for the future robot overlords, I suppose.
You got
I,
you
it,
gotta you gotta you gotta pick a side, and I like their chances.
you're a smart pre. Although you can always trip them, I recommend tripping robots or throwing water on them. The miracles that it takes to make robots function in my lab are often substantial. So equip yourself, get some liquids, get
Get a
some good
stick.
tripping food, a stick. Yeah, like in Central Park. I don't know if
Mhm.
people really do that. Trip the
No,
skaters.
I don't know if they do. I don't know if they do the what is that, Big Daddy?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Only
I hope not. If they do that, they should. They, oh man, I
should
hope somebody comes
apologize.
up. Yeah, they should apologize, and somebody else should come up and be like, "Hey, man, what are you doing?" That's
That's good human-human interaction, which,
exactly.
a lot of human-robot interaction has come from the sphere of social psychology. It's a, yeah, relevant tie-in.
Absolutely. What is one of the hardest things when it comes to your work with human and robot interaction?
A lot of the time, I look at human-robot interaction over long time scales. So keeping robots working and also keeping ties with people long enough to see something like if you put a robot in a play space with young kids over time, trying to inspire physical activity, does it work? Do they stay interested over time? As you and most listeners can probably relate to too, folks often tire of their devices, their toys over time, and the novelty effect is real. It affects us in robotics too. So it's both exciting to me to try to do experiments over long time scales, looking at things often like promoting physical activity in kids or healthy exercise routines in older adults as some examples. But breaking through that novelty effect barrier or trying to re-engage, bring something new, some new feature to a system as it's used over time can be really challenging too.
Absolutely. And what are your thoughts on putting in robotic safeguards? So, for instance, if you were to create a planet-wide library and then set up a series of computers to run said library, but then there was an alien race that invaded said library and like would you like put like safeguards so that the robots could stop the aliens, or would you be able to do, sorry, I'm trying to make a reference to Doctor Who.
I have a deep grudge against Doctor Who because
Oh
my
no.
my almost husband, my college ex, enjoyed Doctor Who, so I have a big chip on my shoulder. I've avoided watching any
I
of
know,
it.
I know. I had made a note.
But let's say aliens just to mix it up.
Sorry for the Doctor Who thing. I was like,
Oh, it's okay.
I remembered, like, I'm like, I'm pretty sure she referenced Doctor Who, but I couldn't remember the exact context. So I'm sorry that it was the negative association.
Oh,
Um,
no worries. I
uh,
should be a bigger nerd and know all of the sci-fi.
oh no, you're all good. I'm only watching Doctor Who for the first time, so I was like, I'm still dipping my toe into trying to make references to it. And so, but yeah, I do appreciate your patience there.
I
But yeah,
really should watch it because I love Douglas Adams and I know he's written at least a few of those episodes.
I believe so. Yeah, and I think you can probably like skip around and you're not going to miss too much. It's very much monster or ethical issue
Yeah.
of the week. Do you feel that there need to be like kind of safeguards that humans can utilize, or that even robots potentially could utilize when it comes to humans,
Mm,
to try and like correct user error or potential harmful actions or something like that?
yeah. I'm a fan of the like no killer robots idea. I feel like putting lethal weapons on robots and automating them is likely misstep on the part of us humans. So that's one thing that I think is a prudent idea, avoiding killer robots. I like your optimistic take on humans kind of monitoring robotic systems, looking at their outputs, keeping them running in human robot collaboration scenes. I think that's not always how the technology is being used, but it actually seems to me like a very prudent way to use technology. I don't know if you've played with things like the Chat GPT, that's the craze right now, but as you get outputs, you could work back and forth with that type of system. It's not technically embodied unless you put it on robot hardware, but
Mhm.
it's definitely relevant to the realm of what roboticists are thinking about nowadays. But what you get out might be useful and coherent, might be totally hallucinated, and having somebody to go back and forth with the system can be useful. So I think that idea of humans and robots teaming together and avoiding kind of lethal robots is a good place to start.
Absolutely. That I can get on board with that for sure. Naomi, this has been so insightful, and I can't thank you enough. If people want to learn more about you or more about robots and human interaction, where would you recommend they go?
You can go to my personal website, naomifitter.com, or my lab website, osusharelab.com. And you could also follow my robot comedy show Facebook page. It's called Singu Hilarity, so play
Great.
on singularity, very relevant to the theme today.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you taking time out and being so patient, listen to me, and I feel like I learned quite a bit, and I hope you had a good time.
Thanks, it was great.
Excellent.
Have a great night, Matt.
You too. Thank you so much. My name is Matt Storrs, and this has been Mattsplaining. Quick shout out to Ryan Lawson, who made the theme music for Mattsplaining. He's part of Beat Blender Studios, which can be found at Beat Blender Studios on Instagram and TikTok. Or if you're in the market for some amazing music, you can contact him directly at beatblenderstudios@gmail.com.